path of diplomacy. The U.S. and Russia are preparing for high-level discussions regarding the situation in Ukraine. Human rights abuses. Now that the Beijing Olympics are over, we examine the status of freedom of religion under China's Communist Party. Royal illness. An update on the health of Queen Elizabeth II after she tests positive for coronavirus. And turning the other cheek. Pope Francis reminds the faithful of the benefits of being kind. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, February 21st, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Peter Damian. I'm Tracy Sable. New developments tonight in the tension along the Russia-Ukraine border. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin will recognize the independence of two regions in eastern Ukraine.
Конечно, мое обращение адресовано и нашим соотечественникам на Украине.
President Putin made the remarks over Russian television. The move opens the possibility of the Kremlin sending weapons to the eastern part of Ukraine. European leaders had hoped he would not recognize the two regions. It is possible the EU will now pursue sanctions on Moscow. And we go to Ukraine now, and Philip Crowther, international affiliate reporter for the Associated Press. Philip, a lot of news coming out of Russia right now. Can you give us an update on the current situation?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, first of all, what's happening here in Kiev and what's happening with the Ukrainian government. A Security Council meeting has just come to an end here with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He is expected to address the nation only a few hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin did the same. And what he did in his over an hour-long speech was escalate this crisis significantly by recognizing two separatist republics, so-called separatist republics. They're breakaway areas of the Donbass area in the southeast of Ukraine. By doing that, well, he is essentially opening the door to a further escalation, making it a possibility for Russian troops to be moved into that area to, in the view of the Russian government, protect Russian-speaking civilians there. Now, this is Ukrainian territory. These are breakaway areas, but it is still on Ukrainian territory, meaning that Russia would be essentially invading Ukraine if this was to happen. This is a very significant and a very serious development coming from Russian President Vladimir Putin. In his speech tonight, he also made pretty clear that he essentially didn't recognize Ukraine as a country, that it does not really have a right to exist. That is a very, very ominous thing for the president of the big neighboring country to say.
And Philip, what's the atmosphere in Kiev right now? How are people responding to this news?
Well, look, I wouldn't say necessarily that everybody has been watching this speech by Vladimir Putin, but if they were, it was a very surreal, maybe, and definitely a scary thing to hear. Because this is the president of a country speaking who has amassed around 150,000 troops around Ukraine on three sides of this country, in the east, in the north, and also in the south. And there are several points of entry, if you will, for Putin's troops. One is through the east. We just discussed that already. The other one is very, very close to here. That's the border with Belarus, where big military exercises have been happening for a week now. There is an enormous amount of Russian troops there, tens of thousands. And the route from there to here is a relatively short one. By car, it's about 2 hours. Takes a lot longer for troops to get here, of course, but that is, of course, what has inhabitants of the capital city of Ukraine very worried, that this enormous amount of troops is encircling Ukraine and that some of them are very, very close, in fact.
And Philip, from your vantage point in Ukraine, how imminent does an invasion feel?
Well, that's the decision of one person alone. That's Russian President Vladimir Putin. He has had those troops ready to invade Ukraine for a while now. He only has to flick the switch essentially for this to happen. There's still a little bit of a chance for diplomacy, and I think essentially the Ukrainian government and the people of Ukraine will be hoping that there is still a possibility out of this crisis, out of a potential invasion. And that best opportunity now is essentially a meeting this coming Thursday between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. That is scheduled for Geneva, but only, says the Biden administration, if there is no invasion by Russia of Ukraine. No guarantees right now at all that it is not going to come to that. If it does, then the door is maybe ever so slightly ajar for maybe even Presidents Biden and Putin to meet up. That seems a long, long way away right now. There are significant fears now that what the administration in Washington has been warning about for a long time, that all plans were being made for an invasion, that those plans could come to fruition very soon.
And all eyes on Ukraine certainly right now. Philip, thank you so much for your time. The White House is reacting to Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to recognize the independence of Russian-backed separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, the White House released a statement saying the U.S. anticipated a move like this from Russia and will respond immediately. The U.S. calls President Putin's decision, quote, a blatant violation of Russia's international commitments and promises new sanctions on top of the sanctions already being threatened.
While President Joe Biden meets with his top national security advisors at the White House, over at the Pentagon, Press Secretary John Kirby says Russia could attack Ukraine any day, but also that diplomacy is still possible.
The president once again yesterday saying he's willing to sit down and talk to Mr. Putin about a peaceful way forward here, obviously assuming there's no invasion.
Across the globe, Russia shows off its firepower, conducting drills. Meanwhile, shelling in eastern Ukraine damaged 16 homes. One family, including a baby, says it has nowhere to flee. Just yesterday in the U.S., demonstrators marched to the White House in support of Ukraine. EWTN News Nightly spoke with the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation.
What kind of evil is it that shells schools and continues to announce bomb threats to schools and places of public civilian activity?
The U.S. even believes Moscow has compiled a list of Ukrainians to be killed or sent to detention camps. The Kremlin called it a lie. As for those threatened sanctions,
I don't think that we should announce what our sanctions are so we can plan for them, but I would like to know what's going to trigger those sanctions. He's been conducting a war against Ukraine in the West since 2014.
Separately tonight, the search continues for the next U.S. Supreme Court justice. Interviews have reportedly started. As for a nominee, nothing to announce yet, but it could come any day now. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A bill in South Carolina is being worked on that would allow churches to meet in person during a pandemic or other emergencies as long as other essential businesses remain open. The bill passed the State House last March. Today is the 50-year anniversary of President Richard Nixon visiting China, marking the first time a U.S. president traveled to that country since 1949. This as the Winter Olympics wrapped up in the communist country this weekend. The games were filled with controversy, COVID regulations, and human rights concerns. After returning home, a Swedish gold medalist speed skater said it was extremely irresponsible to let China host the games. And joining me now is Se-Hoon Kim, director of the Captive Nations Coalition on the Committee of Present Danger China. Se-Hoon, welcome so much. So great to see you here today. Thank you so much for coming on. Let's talk about this historic anniversary and what has changed over the past 50 years, in particular in China.
Well, the situation has only gotten worse in China, as we have foolishly thought that they would be a respectable partner since the beginning, but that has not happened ever. And so as the situation is getting worse day by day, it's imperative that we as part of the free world act on it.
Absolutely. Now, I know you consider yourself a history buff. Talk to us about, why as a young man you became so interested in China, in particular, with the CCP.
Well, firstly, my background, especially in my high school years, was that I was a supporter of the CCP. Matter of fact, I was a supporter of the Marxist ideals. Ironically, I was in a Catholic school myself as well. And the reason behind it was because I was rebellious to a point, rebellious of the system that I couldn't really identify with in that sense. And I guess this ideology really gave me a bit of a mental ease. And so, long story short, I began to look at China as the solution for everybody, a place where socialism and communism thrived while having all of these modern benefits. So that's part of the reason why it got me interested in the CCP, yet when I went to college and began doing research about the realities of the CCPs and its human rights abuses and whatnot, I became enlightened in that sense, and really thanks to great professors from the Veritas Forum and even talking to victims of the CCP, the Falun Gong practitioners, I was able to really open up my eyes to the realities of the abuses of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, that's great, because I was going to ask you, what got you interested in kind of the other side, and really now you're an advocate. Talk to us more about that.
So currently I'm serving as a director of the Captive Nations Coalition. We represent nations that have been taken over by the Chinese Communist Party, so mainly the Southern Mongolians, East Turkestan, Tibet, Hong Kong, and really all of China. And what we do is we want to voice their concerns to the world, but also at the same time use that opportunity as a measure of warning to all of us of what would happen if totalitarianism takes over. And this is a threat that we're facing today. And we're facing it today because of the fact that this evil called the Chinese Communist Party has grown to be a superpower. And it's affecting each and every one of our lives. And unless everyone recognizes that, and unless we especially listen to the voices of those that have been victimized by this horrific system, we believe that we will be in imminent danger, and we truly owe it to the future generation, at least, to do something about it. So.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the Olympics. A lot of people calling those the genocide games, in particular what is happening to the Uyghurs there. But it's not just the Uyghurs in China. Can you talk about the other human rights abuses happening in that country?
Exactly. Believers, Catholics, Protestants, all Christian believers especially have been victims of the Chinese Communist Party since the beginning. And they've been oppressed. Some have gone through some horrific treatments since 1940s, and it really hasn't stopped. And it has only gotten worse under the hands of its dictator Xi Jinping. And so we see that. We also see the situation in Hong Kong, where we were promised a degree of autonomy and freedom, yet all of that has been eroded. Tibet and East Turkestan and Southern Mongolia, all of them are facing cultural genocide as well as arbitrary detentions every single day, and there will be an absence of human rights also if this goes on, and that's how bad it has gotten over the years. So,
what do you think the U.S. can and should do about these human rights abuses in China?
Well, I think we have to reevaluate our economic relations with China. And of course, I say this because our relations with China is part of the main reason why the CCP was able to grow as it is today. And so we have to reevaluate our relations with them in that regard, and also recognize the fact that delinking human rights and our economic partnership was a mistake, and we need to amend that mistake and hold them accountable for all the human rights abuses they're involved with.
We have about 10 seconds left. What would be your final message?
For all believers, please pray. And also ask your legislators to do the right thing, to stand with the people of the captive nations, and to truly just stand for freedom.
All right. Thank you so much, Sehun. Great having you on.
Thank you.
Coming up, why masses all over the world were celebrated this past weekend in honor of an Italian priest who died nearly 20 years ago. Queen Elizabeth II has tested positive for COVID-19. Buckingham Palace says the Queen has mild cold-like symptoms. The 95-year-old British monarch will continue light duties this coming week. Both Prince Charles and his wife Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, recently contracted COVID-19. Each member of the royal family was fully vaccinated. A Catholic archbishop in southern India is strongly denouncing the demolition of a statue of Jesus and nearby Stations of the Cross by civil authorities. authorities. Archbishop Peter Machado of Bangalore says the removal violated a court stay. He calls the action a part of a continued attack on Christians in India. Masses in Italy and around the world were celebrated this weekend in honor of the founder of the Communion and Liberation movement. Father Luigi Giussani began the movement in the 1950s. It received papal recognition in 1982. The Italian priest and theologian died in 2005. He is considered a servant of God. Joining us now from Rome is Michele Borgi, member of the Communion and Liberation International Center. Michele, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. Can you tell us a little more about the Communion and Liberation movement and why it's celebrating a milestone this year?
Communion and Liberation is one of the Catholic movements that were born around the Second Vatican Council. It was born in the mid-50s and it was founded by Father Luigi Giussani. Indeed, this year is a milestone for us because we are celebrating the centenary of the birth of Father Giussani.
And what more can you tell us about servant of God Luigi Giussani and his background?
Well, he was a priest of the Diocese of Milan. In the mid-50s, he realized that the context he was living in, namely Italy, seemed to be a Catholic country. You know, the churches were full of people, the politics had the Christian Democratic Party as a protagonist, but he realized that Catholic faith could become only a tradition. So I would underline two main points of his thought. First of all, for him, Christianism is not a set of moral codes. It's not a doctrine. Christianism is an event, the encounter with Christ. This is the first point. The second point of his thought is that Christianity has to do with humanity. We cannot be Christian, we cannot be really Christian if we do not recognize the relevance of Christian faith to our inner needs. I mean, the need for happiness, the need for love, the need for justice. So in this sense, he realized that Christianity had to be rediscovered in its elementary elements as an encounter with Christ, important for the needs of each man and women.
And Michele, can you talk to us about the sort of work the Communion and Liberation that his center does? And also, do you have any special projects that are planned for the 40th anniversary?
Yeah, the movement of Communion and Liberation is an international movement, so it's present in 90 countries all over the world. So this centenary for us is an occasion to rediscover the gift Father Giussani was for us. And along this line, all the communities all over the world are free to organize things that could be useful to rediscover the message of Father Giussani. The Fraternity of Communion and Liberation organized an academic call for papers over the thought of Father Giussani. We organized also a master's degree award and a doctoral degree award to foster the knowledge of his thought. And we'll be launch an exhibition, a virtual exhibition, to let everyone meet Giussani directly through his voice, through his physical presence, in videos, in conferences, in speeches he had to underline his topics. So this is the effort we are having this year, namely deepening the message of Father Giussani all over the world and let people know him.
Well, Michele, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about this. We really appreciate it. Michele Borgi, member of the Communion and Liberation International Center. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, Pope Francis tells the faithful the best way to defeat evil. Plus, a Catholic priest tells us why he started a cooking show. Pope Francis says the best way to defeat evil and hatred is with kindness.
E poi, perché amare I nemici?
At a Sunday address to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says turning the other cheek is not the action of a so-called loser. Instead, it is done by people with tremendous inner strength and the knowledge they are loved by God. Pope Francis adds that we can still highlight injustice without violence or anger. And finally tonight, a pastor in Louisiana is cooking up some lessons about Christ. Father Robert Cooper joins 4-year-old Lucy in the kitchen to create tasty treats that teach Lucy and the audience about Christ. The series is streamed on Facebook Live, and the videos are also posted to YouTube. And joining me now is Father Cooper, host of Cooking with Father Cooper and pastor at Divine Mercy Parish and the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton School. Father Cooper, welcome. So great to see you. Okay, I have so many questions for you. But first off, tell us what inspired you to do this cooking show?
Well, during the pandemic, my communications director, Becky Delat, got with me and said, let's do something on Facebook Live. Let's do something for the individuals and our community, just to sort of rally around the beginning of Holy Week. And so our first segment was on Holy Thursday in 2021. And from there, it just became a big hit. And we just continued to sort of do the episodes in order to teach the faith and to build up families.
Yeah, I love the videos. They're so adorable. And as mentioned earlier, you're not like cooking, but you're sprinkling in those stories of Christ in the Bible. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the things, growing up, born and raised here in New Orleans, I came from a family where the 3 F's were important, and that would be faith, family, and food. And so because of that, we put those 3 F's together, faith, family, and food, in order to bring the Bible to life, to bring the stories of Christ to life, to bring the teachings of the church and the feast days to life. And so many of the things that we do surround a feast day of the church, or Eucharistic adoration, or one of the stories of Jesus when we did the resurrection rolls, speaking about leading up to Easter Sunday. So all of those things are really meant to build the domestic church, to allow families to be able to really put the faith into practice.
Yeah, and I think it's really great for the little ones, too. Speaking of little ones, you have that lovely little assistant, Lucy. She's adorable.
Yes.
Talk to us more about her and why you decided to include her in these videos.
Well, she just has a wonderful personality, and she was just so excited and so happy to help out. And I have to tell you that I have probably learned more from her as far as cooking than she has learned from me. And so it is just a wonderful way to be able to reach our young families, to be able to reach our children, and to be able to do it in a way so that they can see myself and Lucy working together hand in hand in order to teach the faith and to be an example as Jesus calls us to let the little ones come to me.
Yeah, it's really entertaining, and I know you're teaching a lot of lessons. Can you maybe mention some of those lessons that maybe you taught Lucy and maybe some of the other audience members while cooking?
So certainly, so we have done one in which we made a monstrance out of a waffle, and in the center was the very sweet and delicious whipped cream, as we talked about the importance of the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist and the importance of Eucharistic adoration. On Pentecost, we had a birthday cake that we created to celebrate not only the birthday of the church, but the coming of the Holy Spirit. And so we melted the Jolly Ranchers, and we got to use a big hammer. Lucy loved that segment, and smash the stained glass, as it may, of the Jolly Ranchers into little slithers that became the Holy Spirit outpouring on the church. We've made snake cookies to talk about original sin. So we've covered many different topics.
Yeah, so creative, I've got to tell you. I love the videos and all the recipes. What's been the reaction from the community? What have you heard?
Well, the reaction has been very positive. To be very honest, when we first started, we thought it was going to be sort of a 1-episode show. And that was the Holy Thursday a year ago. And after that, people kept asking when was going to be the next episode. My family enjoyed it. We want to tune in with the children and the grandchildren. And so it's created a lot of excitement here at Divine Mercy Parish in the Archdiocese of New Orleans and even beyond. It has spread. And so the reaction has been very positive, and people have appreciated because it's given them ideas of how to be able to bring the faith to a level that children can understand and have it part of everyday life.
Yeah, and it's like digestible little bits, too, that you're getting, which is really great for the kids. Okay, we're running out of time, but I'm curious because I watched the videos, got very hungry, getting hungry listening to you. If people are interested, where can they find these recipes? And maybe are you thinking about maybe putting together a cookbook?
Well, we haven't thought about the cookbook yet. That is possible. It's certainly, the recipes are all found on our parish's website, divinemercyparish.org. With all the videos and information that people would need. And our next episode is actually coming up tomorrow at 6:45 Central Time. You know, this is King Cake season, Mardi Gras here in New Orleans. So we have a special King Cake episode scheduled for tomorrow to continue this tradition, to teach about the faith through the objects of our everyday life.
I love it. We'll be watching. Thank you so much, Father Cooper. We appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you for having me. God bless.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.